Do we have ourselves a discussion, folks? Yes, your guy Wardy is about to go on a rant. I'm feeling hot-headed. I don't care that it's roughly 1 a.m. Eastern at the time of recording this. No, we're not doing our typical WardyNYM post-game show live streams presented by America's #1 sportsbook, BetUS. Make sure to check them out down below by clicking that link in the description. That way you too get a 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000, as always. But the reason why we're not going live is the Mets simply didn't show up yet again tonight, and a lifeless, a no-show, an inexcusable series loss by a final score of 4-0. So if the Mets bats aren't going to show up, why am I going to show up and go out of my way to do a live stream for an hour plus? Don't get me wrong, I love you live viewers, I truly do, but on a late night game on a Saturday night like this, when your guy Wardy simply has better things to do and to try to get some shut-eye versus covering this team after a ridiculous series loss, I'm still going to come at you with 2 different forms of content. This post-game breakdown, as we're going to get into everything inning by inning, what was wrong for the Mets in this one. Simply put, Logan Gilbert, that splitty, that is going to be a disaster for the Mets, who couldn't get one simple base runner past the past first base. Yes, you heard that correctly. That's how lifeless they were on the offensive end. There are a lot of key updates for the Mets bullpen and the prospects from Port St. Lucie all the way up to AAA, but we're going to break that down in a separate big Mets updates video that I will post in the early morning. Barring any changes, will be around 10 a.m. Eastern or so. So, all right, everybody, I want to see your initial reactions to the Mets series defeat in the comments down below, as always, because I'm beyond fuming right now. Because, look, I understood that heading into this series, it wasn't going to be an easy task. This was far and away your hardest part of the schedule in this 10-game road trip. The fact that you lost against the Halos 2 out of 3 is far more inexcusable looking back now. The fact that you thankfully were able to at least secure 3 out of 4 wins between the Rockies and that one game against the Cardinals is a good thing, but then you enter Seattle, who of course is pushing to win the division. They're battling it out with the Astros, with the Rangers to a lesser degree. We know the Seattle Mariners have the best rotation. One can rightfully argue on paper a tremendous pitching staff, an offense that has been lifeless all year long, and even with that lifeless offense, they were able to pounce on the Mets here with Sean Manaea having nothing to show. We love our Samoan southpaw and Sean, who has been brilliant over his past couple outings, again giving the Mets 7 innings of 1 earned run ball, 7 innings of no earned run ball, again striking out everyone and their mother. Far from the dominant Samoan southpaw you'd expect here in Seattle. Couldn't go past 3 innings. Mind you, this is the first start this season for Sean Manaea. He couldn't go beyond 3 innings. This is the same as Luis Severino, who post-trade deadline had a 3-inning outing, then a 5-inning outing. 2 of the worst outings that we have seen from Sean Manaea this season to a degree on the lengthwise. Now we see here with Sean Manaea, you have to hope for both Sevy Manaea that this is not something that happens again consistently, but that isn't even the big problem here. The big problem is the Mets offense was nowhere to be seen whatsoever. So let's break down everything that transpired in this matchup, folks, because we have a lot to break down here, as now the Mets, as you can see, have fallen back out of a wild card spot by half a game, as the Atlanta Braves somehow, some way legged out their first victory their past 7 games. They won by a final score of 11-8 against the Rockies there. Wasn't easy. It was a sweaty one, but with the Diamondbacks and the Padres simply not losing, because of course Jackson Merrill hits a game-tying home run in the 8th, because of course he does. For like the 3rd time he has a game-tying home run on the road trip for the Padres. They win in extras against Miami. The Diamondbacks just absolutely curb stomped. They took care of business against the Philadelphia Phillies, easily winning that series the same way that the Seattle Mariners easily won this series against the Mets, an inexcusable series loss to say the least. We're going to get into the pitching end. Sean Manaea, what was not working for him today? Look at the command, 5 walks. Oh my goodness gracious, that stinks. We got Huascar Brazoban with a fantastic outing, eating those innings, but you guys are going to call him, of course, a bum or whatever it's going to be, because naturally the one game where the Mets were in a good position with him, they lost because he blew it against the Halos, against Nito, who I will say has been raging hot and tore it up against the Yankees as well, that we saw over the past couple days. So bear that in mind. A red hot batter sadly got the best of Huascar Brazoban, where he was hung out to dry against the Halos there. Carlos Mendoza, I still feel that way, and that is not going to waver at all. Reed Garrett, in his first outing back here with the Mets, casually strikes out the side. We're going to talk about the brilliance that is Reed Garrett, what this means for the Mets bullpen configuration going forward. Phil No Maton, Danny Young, those were your final pieces there in the pen today. On the offensive end, we're going to deep dive how, again, you get no hits, you get no hits, you get no hits, because there was nothing to show for this Metropolitan offense whatsoever, everybody. But before we get into everything, breaking down this ball game, as we always are going to do in our part one of two-part videos, first being post-game, second being Big Mets updates uploaded later on that you're going to see in the early morning. Let's take a quick word to hear from, of course, America's #1 sports book and what you guys know very well at Yes, BetUS.
BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
All right, everybody, let's get into breaking down this ball game. We're going to do rapid fire inning by inning, and then we're going to get into the key takeaways on the pitching, on the offensive end, and then we're going to wrap this one up. I am even going to do a prospect breakdown a little bit in our second video that will be uploaded separate from this one. This is just strictly on the rant front because, again, the Mets had all the opportunities throughout their past 10-plus games to really gain significant ground in the wild card with the way that the Braves were handing them all said opportunities. The problem, the Mets during this time did not take nearly advantage of said opportunities, and I predicted that they would have a 6-4 road trip over this 10-game stand. They currently sit now at, I believe, what is it, 5-5, or I think at best they can do is 5-5 now that they lost this one. It's not looking good, and should the Mets be swept tomorrow, then they're going to find themselves with a below 500 record here on this road trip, which too is inexcusable in itself. The fact that they lost the series with a lifeless offense, nothing to show, worse today than yesterday, in itself is inexcusable. But the Mets already looking like that they're going to have a below 500 road trip. Now you add in, yes, of course, you're going back home, you're going to play the A's, you're going to play the Marlins. Great, good, all awesome stuff. That only means so much when you then have another road trip, and this is the final thing I'll say before I break down the ball game, folks. I just got to let it out. You got the Diamondbacks and you got the Padres before the end of the month, and yes, it's in their ballparks. It's another key West Coast trip. That honestly might just be it from the Mets, sadly, in their postseason run, and they don't get the head out of their you-know-what right now and show some semblance of life here to, at minimum, salvage the series and avoid the series sweep entirely there with Sevy on the bump against Luis Castillo in a huge Sunday night baseball matchup. First time in 20 years that ESPN is doing Sunday night baseball coverage. I would argue that, it's perfectly fine considering the type of coverage that they do at times, but I digress. Let's break down this ball game now, shall we? Because as we saw, Shamania, the Samoan Southpaw, on the bump against that being in Logan Gilbert, and Gilbert, my goodness, my God, my gracious, he was nothing short of dominant for the Mets. Francisco Lindor had a leadoff single to kick off this ball game, but nothing else to show for it. JD Martinez grounds into a double play, and we would see a lot more frustration just like that. Victor Robles greets Mr. Shamania terribly here for the Mets and us fans at least with a double, his 7th of the year. Then he steals his 16th bag. Robles, who has been a lightning rod for the Seattle Mariners, being acquired from the Nationals. We all remember him in DC, a great glove, but with little offense to show, not so much now. And a guy who's had little offense to show this year, it's been very sporadic. Renny Arozarena gets all this one with his 24th double of the year, gives the Mariners a quick 1-0 lead, and already Sean is just throwing meatballs right down the pipe. He throws a wild pitch, which again is not ideal, allows Randy to get all the way to third, and just like that, it's 2-0 because former Met turned foe for the past decade, and Justin Turner, the big red beard himself, rips his 18th double of the season, and just like that, it's a 2-0 Mariners lead. Shamania is really not looking too hot here. He then gives up an RBI single to Mitch Haniger, which makes it 3-0. Dylan Moore thankfully strikes out to end the inning, but not before some brutal work was done against Shamania. A 3-piece in the first for Sean, who was greeted terribly after looking nothing short of dominant his past 2 starts out there on the mound for the Mets. And all I know is Manaea and the Mets, they cannot wait to get back home because they are fed up and done with this West Coast trip. But I don't blame them. The scheduling was far from easy. It was far from easy. We all know that, but at the same time, I can only give them so much excuses here when every game is as vital and as important as it is. I can only give so much of a leash. This is showing the true identity of the Mets when facing quality pitching, which is more the same this season. The big problem that we have seen this year, especially in this series, is that what we have seen throughout previous months this season is a Mets team that, yes, maybe they get shut down the first 5, 6, or top 7 innings by the starter, but they attack the bullpen. bullpen. Now, a really strong rested Mariners bullpen is the demise of this Mets team. Nothing to show for it, and this is exactly why, for Mets fans that are pessimistic about the Mets' playoff chances, should they even make playoffs, I understand those arguments full through and through, because this is yet again the latest example of them having nothing to show against quality pitching, in the case now Logan Gilbert. Because the Mets, again, they go down 1-2-3 in the top of the second. We see the bottom of the second, Rivas get on with a walk. This is the same Rivas with his 180 average and 450 OPS, driving in a pair of runs to have it again best Jose Quintana, who was otherwise brilliant outside that meatball of a curveball to Bliss for the 2-run shot he gave up earlier in that ball game. Jose Quintana did not deserve that 5 earned run line, and Adam Ottavino does not deserve, quite frankly, to be in this Mets bullpen right now. But I digress. Randy Arozarena gets out with a walk, nothing else transpires. The Mets are still losing 3-0, and as you'd expect, they go down 1-2-3 in the third. Justin Turner gets on with a walk, second time he's on base today. There in the bottom of the third, then we see Dylan Moore gets on with a walk. Mitch Garver gets on with a walk. Literally bases loaded, all thanks to the walk. Sean Manaea having no location whatsoever. Him and Alvarez are not clicking at all. They're just not getting the calls, one but two. Sean was laboring just big time in this matchup, was not locating on his pitches. For a guy who's had a lot of great success with that sinker high in the zone, especially this season, he did not have nearly the success that he was looking for in this matchup. The M's had a fantastic eye at the plate, and they were making sure that they were not going to bite here against the Sean Manaea, who simply did not have it. Again, Manaea gets out of that inning, but that does it for Sean Manaea, who's already at 80 plus pitches through 3 innings. Sean Manaea's final line is as follows, everybody. If I didn't state it already, but you've seen it right here. It is, yes, we are looking at 3 innings of 4 hit, 3 earned run, 5 walk, 3 strikeout ball, a 3.44 ERA on the season. Look, Sean, I love you, but this is a killer, and the only reason why I'm not going to rag it too much more than I already am is simply because the Mets offense is the reason why the Mets lost this ball game. This is not one of those games where, oh no, the Mets had a chance, but when you give up early runs, it depletes their opportunity. It really hurts their mentality on trying to get a good groove going when they're already struggling with the pitching as is. That's true to a degree, but what's really true is Logan Gilbert being dominant and the Mets having no recipe to handle said starting pitching that Gilbert and that nails of a bullpen that Seattle provides. Now, to hop back in this one, folks, as we're breaking down this Mets very frustrating 4-0 loss here to, yes, the Seattle Mariners. Brandon Nimmo would get on with a walk. Brandon Nimmo has been top 3 to top 5 in all the National League in walks this season. That continues here, but the Mets don't do anything. JDM with a strikeout and Alonso with a ground out. Alonso and JD with just some horrendous at-bats against Logan Gilbert. They were looking absolutely silly, flailing on the splitty, or just inducing into, double play ground balls that we saw from guys like JDM, or simply just ground outs to third base, which I feel Pete Alonso has done more than anything else this year, quite frankly, as much as that frustrates me and really hurts me to say. Huascar Braziban, again, if there's any bright spots to come out of this, it is Huascar, who pitched 2 dominant innings for the Mets in this one, ate them greatly. Just sucks that, again, another quality outing by Huascar Braziban is going to be brushed under the rug and disregarded by a lot of Mets fans because it came in a loss where the offense had nothing to show. It was the late night West Coast game, so a lot of people aren't even paying attention. And again, it's a shame for Huascar, who has such an electric arm, touching 99 on the gun fairly consistently there, and he came in and got the job done. He gets Robles to strike out, then a fly out and a ground out. Again, all the type of outs you're looking for is what you got from Huascar. The Mets go down in order because, of course, they do 1-2-3 in the 5th. Then it's a 1-2-3 bomb the 5th for Huascar Braziban, who gets at least 1 strikeout there. He would get 2, actually, first on Jorge Polanco, and then we would get a big strikeout there on Mitch Haniger, and thankfully it would get out because that gets passed, but Alvarez gets the throw there to Alonso for the final out. We then head to the top of the 6th. Lindor gets his second hit of the day. The only Mets batter with multiple hits on the day. Nothing to show for it whatsoever. Then we see Reed Garrett come in. Mind you, Reed Garrett, who hasn't pitched in a minute now, coming back for the first time since pre-All-Star break, back from injury. Reed Garrett with a 3.6 ERA, a 3.1 ERA, with a 13.5 K per 9 to right around a 5 walks per 9 this season with the Mets. Entering this outing, strikes out the side, folks. Pure dominance by Reed Garrett, who is nothing short of masterful in his Metropolitan return to the bullpen. And this is exactly why Reed Garrett was called up back from injury, and why a guy like Alex Young, even though I'd make the argument for a guy like Adam Ottavino outside the minor league options, I understood why Stearns did what he did. I still think that Adam should be parted with in the case of when both SRF and Daniel Nunez are here and with rosters expanded. But I digress here. Let's get back into Reed Garrett here for a second, because the splitter was a thing of beauty. Again, it was topping out 90, sitting right around 89 there. It was up on the year average by 2 miles per hour. They utilized 29% of the time. The cutter 29% of the time, touched 94, sat 93. That was up 2 miles per hour. The sweeper 21% of the time today, topped out 86, sat 85 that we saw there. Four-seam fastball just 14%, which is huge. Reed Garrett, why he hasn't had much success in his MLB career up until this season is because he really changed his ways from being more of a fastball heavy pitcher, where that's what he was throwing most, to now having that in the back burner as his second, if not last, pitch that he utilizes on average in his arsenal. Topped out 98 and sits right around 97 there. Up on the velo, the sinker, which he threw just 7% of the time, touched 97 and sat 97 there. And he just looked brilliant there in Reed Garrett, who had a ridiculous 100% whiff rate that we saw on the splitter and the four-seam fastball. Mind you, the four-seam fastball was only thrown a couple times, but all swing and misses that we saw there on the splitter, again, fantastic whiffs. Cutter at a 33% whiff rate. Again, 50% whiff rate on the sweeper. You got striking out the side, Mr. Reed Garrett back with a lively arm. For those that thought that Reed Garrett was washed up, that this was just a fairy tale story, they weren't paying attention. This is what Reed Garrett is. Just give him rest. Do not overwork him. Do not have to have him out there every single day because of Edwin Diaz's incompetence, sadly, because of, I shouldn't even say incompetence, just unfortunate situation, rather, with the 10-game suspension, the injury as well, that depleted this Mets bullpen and hurt guys like Reed Garrett so much when they were just gaining a groove at the MLB level. Just because the guy's a minor league MLB veteran there doesn't mean that he's a veteran actually at the major league level. So let's bear that in mind. Reed Garrett, though, back healthy, looking lively. That's a huge weapon for this Mets bullpen that can eat plenty innings for them as long as, again, knocking on wood, he stays healthy. The Mets, as we see, get a single from JD Martinez, JD's lone hit of the day at the top of the 7th. Then we see Alonso strikes out, McNeil strikes out, and Vientos grounds out because, of course, they do. Phil Maton with a not-so-great outing. Maton, who I truly believe could be on the outside looking in for the Mets if they decide to part ways with guys beyond Adam Ottavino, in the case of having both Sean Reed-Foley and Daniel Nunez in this bullpen, both of which I think are more serviceable than what Maton is currently providing for you. Not that I dislike Phil Maton, but again, I think it just could be an abundance of riches for the Mets where they actually have a good problem on their hands here, even if they cut Adam Ottavino. So if there's one pitcher that I think could be considered not named Adam Ottavino, parted in this Mets bullpen at any point over the next month and a half or so, it would be Phil Maton, in my humble opinion, barring any changes. Again, I like Phil Maton. I don't want to see him go, but again, should it happen, don't be overly shocked, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. But we see Maton strike out Robles, then he gives up a single to Randy Rosarena, who continues a strong game. Kyle Riley, of course, gets on with a walk because the Mets, who continue to lead all the National League in walks, again, comes back to bite them huge as Justin Turner rips another key hit, another RBI, makes it 4-0 Seattle in this one, and that is the final score that they would go on to win by. Harrison Bader comes in there that we see with a single with 2 outs in the 8th. The Mets have nothing to show. Dylan Moore gets on base with a walk and then steals his 21st bag of the year on Danny Young, because of course he does. Thankfully, Danny Young, who is the lone southpaw option in the Mets bullpen over Alex Young, is staying there and is looking sharp. He gets out of that inning unscathed, and the Mets again go down in the 9th inning. That we see nothing to show. Brandon Nimmo grounds out, a line out for JD Martinez, and a ground out for Pete Alonso. Have nothing to show for Andres Munoz, who gets the save and gets the job done against the Mets as they lose this one again by a final score of 4-0. So as we pivot now, folks, briefly, let's talk a little bit more on the pitching end, because Sean Manaea, again, this is a Sean that was far from brilliant in this one, and to further deep dive what didn't work for Sean Manaea in this one, it's a couple things. One, he was universally down slightly on his velocity outside of his sinker, which he utilized the most, in this matchup, but just no bite whatsoever, not getting a lot. The sinker, which again, he's not supposed to induce a lot of Ks to begin with on. Sean isn't a overwhelming strikeout pitcher. However, he's just looked brilliant in doing so his past couple outings, but I firmly believe the context of those outings was important. And again, to see Sean Manaea labor against, you know what, I'm actually going to backtrack here, because just because Sean Manaea is facing a star-studded rotation, the Mariners, doesn't mean that they have a star-studded lineup. They don't. However, they still worked him unbelievably well, and we saw there the sweeper, the fastball, the changeup, the sinker just not looking the way that you're hoping there, and Sean Manaea did not have good control of the zone whatsoever, and to have 5 walks with Francisco Alvarez catching you is a glaring problem, because Alvarez is known for his fantastic frame jobs. He is a superior defender when he's healthy and he's feeling right with his shoulder. We all know that. This is not one of those games where, you know, I'm going to look at Sean Manaea and say, okay, he's the sole reason why we lost. It's simply on the offense here, but he didn't do us any favors either, and that's certainly a bummer, and you have to hope for Sean this doesn't happen again, because for the Mets and their continued hopes on trying to push and actually crack wildcard play, it is inexcusable to have outings like this for now Luis Severino, Sean Manaea. Again, 2 of their past 3 starts combined have themselves, actually I shouldn't say that, but regardless, we see Sean now with a 3-inning outing. Luis Severino 2 outings ago with 3 innings. His last one was 5. Still not over. Nothing great there. You need more length from both these guys, and we expect that from Sevy, especially for Sean Manaea. I expect him to be better. This is an unfortunate one, and again, the Mariners' offense, which has been far from the problem for most teams this season, came back to just get enough done against the Mets, against Sean Manaea, and ultimately against a Mets lineup that had nothing to show for it on the offensive end. Because as we mentioned, offensively, you have literally nothing there. This is an absolute joke of an offensive showing, and this is not going to get the job done, folks. Again, I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure out that the Mets are not going to make playoffs, nor are they going to get anywhere anytime soon should they be putting up these offensive numbers. And this is a problem for the Mets, because now they're getting in a inconsistent slide post-trade deadline, when that simply cannot be happening. Do I think that the recipe for the Mets to fail is right there, where they have no chance of having to run this year? No, I don't think that's the case. I think that they absolutely still have an opportunity to really pounce this year. Let's not forget how deep this lineup truly is with Starling Marte coming back from injury that we're going to talk about in our updates video separate from this, along with Jose Iglesias, Jesse Winker, guys that didn't play but you have off the bench. Again, the Mets, when right, have a really deep lineup this year, but it's about how do they profile on the day by day? How do they handle adversity? And I know that they don't have the sexiest team on paper, but you still expect a more valiant effort than what you got here against, even, yes, as great as he is, Logan Gilbert. Yesterday was Bryce Miller, and what I'm sure is going to be another dominant outing. Sadly, not from George Kirby, but from, yes, Luis Castillo. Is not going to be an easy task for this Mets team. Francisco Lindor now 2 for 4 on the day that we saw there. The lone Mets hitter with a pair of hits. 258 average, 786 OPS on the season. Brandon Nimmo 0 for 3 that we see with a walk, a 231 average, a 754 OPS. JD Martinez 1 for 4, 259 average, a 784 OPS. Pete Alonso 0 for 4, 242 average, 794 OPS. Jeff McNeil 0 for 3, batting 5th. Another rough day there for Jeff McNeil, 237 average, a 667 OPS. Mark Vientos 0 for 3, 270 average, 860 OPS. Tyrone Taylor 0 for 3, 239 average, 684 OPS. Francisco Alvarez 0 for 3, 263 average, 742 OPS. Harrison Bader 1 for 3, 269 average, and a 714 OPS. That is what you got from the Mets, which was so little on the offensive end, everybody. So to wrap this up and to conclude our conversation here, before I do a separate recording on all the latest key Mets updates, let me leave you with this. The Mets now, again, currently 5 games above 500, a half game out of a playoff spot. They have teams nipping right at their heels there in the Cardinals and the Giants, just to name a few. The Pirates, of course, have not done themselves any favors as of late, but they are still in that mix for the most part. The Arizona Diamondbacks, the Padres, 2 teams that could easily end the Mets season at the end of this month, are 2 teams that simply are not going to lose anytime soon. So the most vulnerable team right now for the Mets continues to be that Atlanta Braves team squad, with how depleted that they are with their injuries this year. For the Mets to not pounce the way that they have really shows, I think, more about them, and sadly their season. Why, again, I can understand pessimism for fans that aren't even at a 50% level and belief that they will crack playoffs this year. I think the Mets still have at least right around a 45-50% chance of getting there with the way that they are continuing to play, but they have to make sure that they avoid these slides. They have to make sure that they dominate on their homestand and win both those series, and they have to make sure that they at minimum win one, if not both of those series against the Padres and the Diamondbacks, which looks like the tallest task imaginable, with them looking like the best teams in Major League Baseball right now, and the Mets now looking 5-5, if not 4-6 over their past 10 games for a team that was otherwise rolling so much for the better half of 2 months this season, not looking as great, nearly as consistent as of late. And as much as I love this Mets team, I'm here to tell you they are going to get nowhere if they continue to turn out outings like this, because what sticks out most is, yes, I understand it's a long road trip. The West Coast time is not benefiting these guys whatsoever. Gonna have a lot of guys in funks that they're not used to playing in Seattle, not used to seeing these pitchers that they never see in Miller and Gilbert. And again, you can make the argument that yes, that should be something to bear in mind, because they wouldn't see them unless they match up in the World Series. You're not gonna, not to jinx anything, but in all seriousness though, even having said all those factors, all those valid excuses, it is still inexcusable to drop back-to-back games in this series and not show any semblance of the offensive end. That is why we're not only frustrated as fans, but that is why a lot of Mets fans are losing their pure optimism that they otherwise had this past month, seeing this Mets team play and not play nearly as consistent as they otherwise have previously this summer. Mets fans, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your frustration level in the Mets right now after they dropped their first 2 games out of a 3-game set against the Mariners? Are you feeling hot-headed like your guy Wardy is right now? The only reason why I'm not screaming my head off more so is because, one, I know how dominant this pitching staff is, so I'm not shocked by this, but it's still inexcusable that it happened. And 2, it is, again, past 1 a.m. at the time of me recording this right now, so your guy is going to get himself some shut-eye. That's going to be it for your guy Wardy, everybody. Our latest post-game segment, rant, vent session, whatever you want to call it. Mets lose this one, and they look to get back in the winning ways before it's too late and before this road trip wraps up here for their Sunday night baseball matchup against the Mariners. There's 7:10 p.m. Eastern game starter, so I'll see you all there for post-game coverage as always. Until then, have a great rest of your night, day, evening, whenever you're watching this, everybody. Let me know your key takeaways down below, your frustration level, everything in between. Stay tuned for our big Mets updates video, and as always, no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.